Welcome back. We will be dealing with the organizational development and change. Block 1, understanding change. Under Block 1, Unit 3, factors critical to change. We'll be talking about the introduction part, the axis of organizational change, that is the prime factor, what makes excellent companies tick, the emergence of humanistic philosophy in management of change and organization, facilitation of planned change, the rational and natural system models of organizational analysis related to change, and organizational development action research and the intervention model. Introduction. We know that successful organizations have three characteristics. They are more profitable than their counterparts. They are growing faster than their competitors. And they are recognized as leaders of at least some part of their industries. Happy people have three main characteristics. That means they feel they have significant control over their own lives. They feel they are respected for the contributions they make, and they also feel that they are contributing to something worth doing. These are reasons why we live in difficult times, that there is a discipline, that's a grand strategy to bring it about. Grand strategy is therefore about the transformation of management itself. Its purpose is to find a superior way of managing the ultimate competitive advantage. The axis of organizational change, the prime factor. Customers, suppliers, distributors, and dealers are the most unbiased assessors of a company which deals with them extensively. A customer who buys and continue to buy the product of a company, particularly non-consumer goods, has deep understanding of the managerial process in the operation of the supply corporation. Similarly, suppliers to these companies often have an understanding and insights not only about the product and managerial processes, but also about the nature, strategies, and the value of such companies which are truly very unique. Perhaps the quality and the depth of their observations are derived from the fact that they also supply goods and services to the competitors of the company. The analogy is also applicable in relation to the dealers and distributors of the products of the company, since it is extremely likely that they also deal with the products of the company's competitors. But in some cases, they are often cynical in viewing the managerial effectiveness of the corporation. But at other times, in the case of other companies, their comments often have an element of admiration, broadening, and sycophancy. The axis of organizational change, the prime factor, the managerial excellence dimensions identified in earlier research are related to first, the long term corporate objectives, cultural values, the management styles, business strategy, organizational structure, management systems, quality of human resources, working climate, and at the last, the leadership. Definitely, the managerial excellence dimensions identified in earlier research will be related to all these factors because long term corporate objectives. What is the objective of the organization? The vision of the organization. What are the cultural values the organizations have been following? The management styles, whether it is autocratic, whether it is bureaucratic, how they are, the business strategies they are following, what is the organization structure is like it's a very high or a flattened organization, the management systems, how they are recruiting or how what are the quality of the people employed in the organization, the climate of the organization and the leadership styles. Further, the analysis and additional rounds of brainstorming led to the conclusion that some of the following could be viewed as overarching consideration in achieving the managerial excellence. First one is corporate objectives. These are the objectives that go beyond the conventional statements of quantified goals like percentage growth rate or the return on investments or profitability percentage. Second one is the objectives, which encompass a strategic vision of the future environment. Third one is identify its opportunities in the marketplace with clarity and capitalize of these opportunities effectively as well as efficiently. Next one is the culture and values. Kind of values and aspiration that form the guiding force of the company. The values relating to high standards of performance and work ethics reinforce among the employees. Rule bound and bureaucratic culture prevails, or it is one where formalization of procedure is kept to the minimum, people relating a spirit of entrepreneurship and risk taking. Decision making and communication progress. It means the extent of delegation and decentralization in the company. Is delegation encouraged and does it take place without interference in the delegated task is a big question mark. Factors critical to change, which is the extent, process, and quality of communication among the managers. What are the formal and informal mechanisms that results in effective and speedy communications? Again, it's a question mark with a value of time as resource. Business and policy objectives. Are the company's functional, that is the finance, personnel, research and development, etc., strategies consistent with each other? Are they integrated? The company's strategic responses to change in the external environment, especially changes in the government policy, competition, and consumer preference. And their success is the past. The rate in terms of numbers of a new product development and the time taken. Work organization structures resulting in clarity of relationship and simplicity and ease of management. Structure allowing for problem solving and entrepreneurship. Personal, that means the human resources management. Promotions and rewards based on consideration of merit or performance. Policies the companies adapt so as to allow for personal growth of the employees, that is job enlargement, job rotation, the extent of motivation, the levels of moral and commitment among the employees, especially lower level of operatives who actually do the work consistently. McKinsey's 7S model, that is hard and soft, for the organizational effectiveness. McKinsey has defined 7S with the name of hard, that means which covers the strategy, structure, system, which comes under hard, and the other four soft are superordinate goals, styles, staff, and skills. The search, or what makes the excellent companies tick, that means the search for organizational effectiveness in the earlier years had focused on basically three distinct streams of organizational functioning, namely the strategy, structure, and system. Here, the strategy, structure, and system under McKinsey 7S modes come under hard. These three organizational effectiveness determinants identified earlier, mainly the strategy, structure, and system, came to be known as the hard factors because it was possible to change them by deliberate and conscious decision and managerial direction. It was known as hard factors because the strategy can be changed by the organization as well as the structure and system of the organization can be changed as per the time required or as per the market requirements, as per the new technologies coming in. These are the three important hard factors, that is the strategy, structure, and system, which can be changed. That's why these were known as the hard factors. And yes, of course, this can be changed by deliberate and conscious decision and about the managerial direction that these can be changed. While it was clear that the other soft factors, which is known as the superordinate goals, style, staff, and skills, are the soft factors which centered on people, their mushy sentiments relating to what I usually call the people related factors at an idealized level were often of limited practical value in actionable terms as they seldom went beyond idealistic notions. Also, they rarely permitted the identification of organizational dimensions which could be pinpointed as leading to organizational effectiveness. What makes excellent companies tick? We can see that's a new view of organization. Therefore, looks like the following. We have the superordinate goals, system, style, staff, structure, strategy, skills. That mean the hard and soft factors connecting each and every factors which makes the organizations, the new organization, look like this. How the strategy, structure, system, style, staff, skills, and subordinate goals, they are all interconnected. None of these factors can be left isolated, because if any of the factors are left behind or kept isolated, then the organizations cannot be an excellent organization or cannot sustain in long term. None of these factors can be ignored. So a good organization has to take care of these seven factors, including the hard as well as the soft factors, which has to be there and taken care so as to achieve the organizational goal. The most significant point of this diagram is that there is neither a starting point nor it is a managerial totem pole to be as enshrined in the future corporate folklore, available to evaluate and pronounce which factor is more important than others. From this diagram, we cannot make out that what is the starting point and which one is more important than the other one. So it leaves things open for any of us, indicating perhaps that the area which is relatively more important in a particular organization is determined by the context of the organization in terms of its business, market, competition, technology, societal settings, which substantially influences the social and political variables and the regulatory environment. The emergence of humanistic philosophy in management of change and organization. The Hawthorne studies raised management's awareness of the impact of human element on organizational performance, because previously man or the human who were working in the organization were treated like machines, and they were not considered as, or they were not considered as human beings. But when we can find out that the human element has some impact or major impact on the organizational performance, which the Hawthorne has shown through its experiments, various experiments he has conducted, and shown that how the impact of human elements has the role on the organizational performance. Human relations became important both as a field of academic study and as the subject matter in the training of the managers. While the subject of the human relations received more attention, it was until the late 50s that these became something more than an addition to managers' toolkit. A number of prominent social scientists developed the theoretical foundations that made human relations a management philosophy and approach. Abraham Maslow's theory of motivation became a platform from which organizational analysis as well as worker motivation was studied. Maslow had given a need hierarchy theory which starts from the basic needs, that is the need hierarchy focuses on the basic needs and it goes up to the self actualization needs. His concepts of the need hierarchy and particularly his notions of self actualization became very popular with managers who tried to incorporate them into their styles of managing and into their approach to the organization. Maslow's theory was understandable, simple, could be very easily translated to organizational terms as a way to analyze and formulate approaches to motivation and moral, and had an additional advantage of lending itself to the personalization of the workplace. The most significant impact, however, came from the notion of self actualization, as some of the organizations tried to build a structure and a set of norms which would permit the workplace to provide self actualization opportunities for the people organization. Building on Maslow's concept of organizational model, Chris Aguirre's further explored the relationship between the needs of the individuals and the organizational context within which the individual actually works. Argyros argued against much of what was then being attributed to the classical of bureaucratic model of organization and the classical views of the management process. He showed that the notion on which the organizational society was built had inherent contradictions that ran counter to the natural development of the human beings. Rensis Likkert's orientation, like those of his contemporaries, was viewed the organization as much more humanistic social organism than as a bureaucracy designed to maximize the technical efficiency of human beings. Taken collectively, these humanistic views reflected a prescriptive as opposed to descriptive orientation towards organizational change and development. Facilitation of planned change. The facilitation of planned organizational change as a process involving collaborative relationship between client systems and social sciences professionals may now be said to have emerged as recognized through still precarious activity in human affairs. One way of attempting to increase adaptive capability under these conditions is to couple the resources of the social science with the competence already available in the organizations. One way of effecting this coupling is through establishing a collaborative action research type relationship between social scientists outside and independent of the organization and those inside it who represent its various systems and are directly concerned with its affairs. In such a relationship, joint responsibility is accepted for bringing about organizational change towards agreed ends identified through a search process to which each party makes how own contribution through all decisions regarding the actual introduction of any change of whatever character remains strictly with the member of the client system. We can see that frequent evaluations must be made both of what is experienced and done, so that on the one hand a process of social learning can be realized or released in the organization, and on the other hand an increase in knowledge will return to the scientific community. These last two aspects of central importance, for even if the available social science resources were the only constraint, the number of organizations able and willing to enter through going engagement of this type must be limited. Even if not formally researched, every such engagement should be regarded as a research undertaking in the formal sense, from which an attempt should be made to secure a multiplier effect, and this effect is beginning to be brought about in a number of ways. The rational and natural system, that is models of organizational analysis related to change. The rational model of organizational analysis. In this rational model, the organization is conceived as an instrument, that is, as rationally conceived means to realization of expressly announced group goals. Its structures are understood as tools deliberately established for the efficient realization of these group purposes. And organizational behavior is thus viewed as consciously and rationally administered, and changes in organizational pattern are viewed as planned devices to improve the level of efficiency. This models takes account of departures from rationality, but often tends to assume that these departures derive from random mistakes due to ignorance or any kind of error in calculation. So fundamentally, the rational model implies or says that a mechanical mode, in that it views the organization as a structure of manipulable parts, each of which is separately modifiable with a view to enhancing the efficiency of the whole. Individual organizational elements are seen as subject to successful and planned modification, enactable by deliberate decisions. The natural system model of organizational analysis. In this model, it is regarded the organization as a natural whole. But previously, when we were talking about the rational model, it was as in the concept. They have assumed the organization as an instrument. But here you can see the natural system model, the organizations as a natural whole or a system. So the realization of the goals of the system as a whole is but one of the several important needs to which the organization is oriented. Its component structures are seen as emergent institutions which can be understood only in relation to the diverse need of the total system. The organization, according to this model, strives to survive and to maintain its equilibrium, and this striving may persist even after its explicitly held goals have been successfully attained. So the major difference here, we can see that in the previous model, the organization was taken as granted as a instrument, that is, as rationally conceived mean the realization of expressly announced group goals. But in this case, it is a natural whole where the realization of goals of the system as a whole is but one of the several important need to which organization is oriented. The focus is not on deviation from rationality, but rather on disruptions of organizational equilibrium and particularly on the mechanisms by which equilibrium is homostatically maintained. When this kind of deviation from the planned purpose are considered, they are viewed not so much as due to ignorance or any kind of error, but as arising from the constraint imposed by the existent social structure. So, in this given situation, the ignorance of certain participation may not be considered injurious but functional to the maintenance of the system's equilibrium. Sources of the classical mode. The classical mode is definitely descriptive of the early organizational structure with which we all are familiar: the church, the military, and the railroads. These are the early one, how the organizational structures will be related to, like a church, the military, and the railroads. We can easily picture the military organization in our mind as a pyramid with the commander and the chief at the top and the structure spreading out below down through the majors, lieutenants, non-commissioned officers, and finally privates, because these will be helping to have a shape like a military organization as a pyramid shape with the commander and the chief at the top of the organization or top of the organization structure, and below that the structure spreading out below down through the major ones like the lieutenants, non-commissioned officers, and some privates. So each individual reports to the other individual on this execution of a specially designed task, and the cumulative total of these tasks should be added upon to the mission of the entire military organization. The participative model is derived from the work of any behavioral scientist. The participative model is one which many students tend to think as McGregor's theory Y, while the model's assumptions about the individuals are closely akin to McGregor's thinking about people. The model has assumptions and the implications which are more far reaching than theory Y. The individual, according to this participative authors, the individuals in the organization is engaged in a multi-dimensional process of development. Within this dynamic development process, the individual is seen moving through the process of maturity. As he matures, this individual's needs and the desires seek to be in a position of relative independence in which this further has some level of the individual seek to be in a position of relative independence in which he has some level of self determination about his future. So in this participative model we can see that the work of is been derived from the behavioral scientist, and the McGregor's theory why is in focus, while the model's assumption about the individuals are closely akin to McGregor's thinking about people. The model has assumptions and implications which are more far reaching than the theory why. So this participative authors, the individuals in the organization is engaged in multidimensional process of development. Within this dynamic development process, the individual is seen moving through the process of maturity. As he matures, this individual's needs, goals, and desires tend to move in a specific directions. The individual seeks to be in a position of a relative independence in which he has some level of self determination about his future. Organization states and processes. According to participative theorists, the overall objective of the organization is to achieve a satisfactory integration between the needs and the desires of the members of the organization and the person functionally relating to it, such as the consumers, shareholders, and suppliers. And it is assumed that management can make full use of these potential capacities or capabilities of human resources only when each person in the organization is a member of one or more effectively functioning work groups, thus participating in the overall organizational effort. Further, it is also required that these groups have a high degree of group loyalty, effective skills, and performance goals. Interaction within the system. The participative organization modelists make a number of assumptions about the interaction within the system, both at the level of individual and in light of the entire organizational system. When we are talking about the individual level, the integration of the individual into the entire big organizational system is described by the principle of supportive relationship. So when the individual level or at the individual person is trying to integrate with the entire organization system, it is described by the principle of supportive relationship. This principle actually states that the organizational interaction should be conducted so that the individuals will view their interactions as very much supportive. That is, that in all the interaction and in all relationship within the organization, the individuals in light of his background, values, and expectations will feel these interactions build and as well as maintain his sense of personal worth and importance. Organizational change. The participative model of organization views change as a total system codification rather than as atomistic alteration. That means the change is viewed as a total system rather than something very much standalone. That is, if a manager wishes to create a change, the participative organization, he cannot merely change one small piece of the organization, but in the other hand, he has to prepare the entire organization since under the model's linkage pin design, the entire organization would be definitely affected. So, consequently, according to the participative designers, change should start by altering the most influential casual variables affecting what you want to change actually. Then there should be systematic plans prepared to modify all the affected parts of the organization in carefully coordinated steps. So here we can see that in the participative model or participative design, the change should start. That means the change should be initiated by altering the most influences casual variables which is affecting what you want to actually change. Then there should be some kind of systematic plans prepared to modify all other affected parts of the organization, which has to be done very carefully through a systematic procedures has to be followed. Conflict management. The change method described above would involve each individual in the change process. Definitely, all the employees working in the organization will be part of the change process. So, securing each person's commitment to the proposed change and therefore minimizing the potential for any conflict. So, the organization has to see that the change process is occurring in a smooth manner rather than any conflict arising from it. In fact, under the model's assumptions, all conflicts is managed by the participation of the individuals in the joint decision making period. Ideas may be challenged. That ideas may be challenged and it should be welcomed because once it is challenged, we will be knowing the pros and cons of the ideas. People will have a transparent view of how the change is affecting their lives in the organization so that we can or the organization will be able to minimize the conflict arising from the change. Sources of data, that mean while the participative mode is closely linked to the thinking of later researchers like the McGregor and Argyris, and to a greater extent on the work of Rensis Likert and his colleagues at the University of Michigan, the deepest root the participative model are in the work of Kurt Lewin. While there are some differences in various researchers' point of view, they all find common ground in their universal applications of the model. This is irrespective of time, size, location, or nature of business. They all felt that the participative model is the way in which an organization should and can be most effectively designed because they have said that when there is a participative model, you are encouraging your employees to participate, to give their decisions, to suggest their suggestions, which will be definitely more effective in case of implementation of change because it will be quite transparent. Employees will be learning how to handle change, how to welcome change. Investigation of a change is an exercise intended to help the participant surface his or her introspection about a personally experienced organizational change episode to make them available for examination and comparison with those of others. Organizational development is a portmanteau, people centered approach to organizational change. The would be change agent needs to grasp securely what organization development is to internalize a working definition in order to be able to read, understand, and draw upon the varied literature written under the banner. In most recent period, even business cycles appear to have had a different complexion with the up parts being shorter and weaker and down parts longer and more severe. This has led to all sorts of iconoclastic forecast, iconoclastic forecast of economic doom and permanent changes in our economic fortunes in a lower growth, lower prosperity future. However, there is again another side or another view, a view which always says that we have experience in these two approximately 25 years period that are the two parts of a long wave. The first from the end of the Second World War until the early 70s, the expansionary or the inflationary A phase. The second, from the early 70s until now, the recessionary or deflationary, that is the phase B, driven by the latest in the burst of technological innovations and waves of the population growth that have been characterized the economic history of United States and other Western countries for the last 200 years. In fact, the pattern of these economic growth since the beginning of the 19th century with a lot of smoothing looks like in the figure. Here we can see the waves and the economic growth pattern in United States from 19 sorry from 1800 to 2000. That's in we can see how the phase A, phase B. Here the first phase, which is here as the phase A, you can see that it is the first from the end of the Second World War until the early 70s, and the phase B, the second from the early 70s until now, that is the recessionary or the deflectory of phase B, with waves and time on the x-axis and y-axis. There have been four long waves, each about 50 years in length actually. The first began just before and end of the 18th century, and the last is just about at its end in the middle of the last decade of the 20th century. A chronology of these waves along with their principal industries driver is shown in just the table below 1.1. That is the wave, the first wave, the phase A and B, that states 33 and 22 with the drivers of 1972, where it started in 1825 to 1847, then again from 1925 to 1972 with the lengths of years of coals, canals, textiles, wrought irons. Second wave, which is from 1847 to 1874, then again from 1874 to 1893 with railways, steam power, gas lighting, smelting technology. Third wave, that is from 1893 to 1913, and again from 1913 to 1939 with the length on the focus area of steel, petroleum, telephone, automobiles, electric power. And the fourth phase, which starts from 1939 to 1974 and 1974, which is continuing with automobiles too, electric appliances, aircraft and aviations, chemicals, synthetic fibers, pharmaceutical, radio and television. So we can see how the depression of 1840s, 1890s and 1930s in United States marked the end of recessionary B periods of the first, second and the third waves. In each case, the industrial drivers of the ending wave had lost all their ability to propagate economic growth, and the new industries and not yet reached the size where they could take over. Much of the 90s doom predicting has been driven by the simple expectation that history will repeat itself at the end of the fourth wave, resulting in another depression. Whether one accepts this pessimistic view of a short term prospect or not, the data certainly suggests that we are fast approaching another inflection point where a B phase ends, and if this the long wave phenomenon repeat itself as A phase begins. This would accord with what we have recently experienced in the shakeouts, a red shift in the companies and industries making up our economy. So, the sixth economic revolution, aftermath of the financial crash in the world's money center, that is the first revolution, that is aftermath of the financial crash in the world's economic centers, that is New York, London, and Tokyo in particular. Slow down in growth until the next A phase really gets going, if it does. Now, collapse of communism, but maybe the re-emergence of fascism. Fourth, importance of education as knowledge becomes the source of value added rather than merely labor. Rise of communitarians, capitalism in Germany, Japan, and maybe the rest of Pacific Rim. And last one is the competitive convergence of the major economies on the drivers of the future growth. This organizational development, action research and intervention model, here an illustration of this clustering of innovation is shown by the period of 1876 to 1903 spanning the end of second wave, which Mandel put at 1893. That means the first one, the telephone by Alexander Graham Bell, that is during the 1876 when this telephone revolution started, how it changed the life of humans. They were talking to each other over telephone. The talking machine by Thomas A. Edison, that is during 1877. The electric light by again Thomas A. Edison. Then the gasoline automobile all through the first, that is 1889. The trolley car by Van Diobel Sprague, 1884 to 1847. Photographic film and roll holder by George Eastman and Williams H. Walker, followed by transparent film in 1889. The linotype of Merger Genger Thalner, that is 1885. The electric reduction furnaces by Cowles, 1885. The recording editing machine by Burgos in 1888. High frequency wireless by Macaroni in 1896. The airplane by Orwelly and Wilbur Wright, that is that is more known as the Wright brothers, that is in 1903. So this the modern corporation as we know it came into the being in the third, that is the phase B, that is around 1913, that is managing change in 1939. It encompassed the delineation of centralized and decentralized roles, the development of line and staff concepts of authority, and what has been described as the greatest of all Americans' inventions, training. This was the time when Alfred P. Sloan, perhaps the leading organizational architect of this third B phase, was using his administrative genius to turn General Motors into the largest industrial enterprise of its time. The ideas of the product and the production genius Henry Ford built the automotive industry in its first innovation drive through the period or through innovation driven growth period. Sloan brought the order and market focus to the gigantic new firms it created. And the theory overtook Ford in the industry's second consolidation dominated phase. Through time, we can see there are number of inventions, there are number of inventions coming and affecting the human as at the personal level and at the organizational level. That is what we are talking actually about when there is the change coming up into the lives of the human resources, especially working in the organizations. They should be more transparent in nature. It should be much discussed. If it is not a sensitive issue, has to be discussed among the employees. Their suggestions need to be taken up, and it should be seen how easily, how smoothly these new systems, new changes occurring has to be integrated to the working of the organizational structures as well as the working actions of the people who are working in the organization. That is what is the main motive when the change is occurring. The profusion, the confusion, and the delusion of management techniques we have seen in the last decade and a half is not different in character to what was going on earlier B phases. In the very first, when we are talking about Harvard Business Review in October 1922, 9 years into the phase B of the third wave, and thereby corresponding approximately to the stage we were at in the fourth wave in the mid, that is around 980s. We definitely find it is quite surprising to observe to what extendable intelligent businessmen have turned and are still turning to the methods and counsel, these methods of dissecting the mental and moral qualities of persons in relation to the given as as well as the task to be performed, where he quacked with a boasted, ready-made and dogmatic infallible. where we need to know that these are the phases which number of changes have occurred and how people in the organizations need to adopt those changes and implement it and try to integrate them to their systems and run the business in a fruitful way where they are able to achieve their both organizational goals, keeping in view their mission and vision, where vision is the long term and mission is the short term actions need to be seen and how it is to be achieved. It is the duty of the organization to see how change is implemented and accepted by their people and implemented in a full fledged way. Thank you and meet you in the next class.